We get to all of it starting with NBC's Tehran bureau chief Ali Arouzi, who joins us with the latest from the ground in Iran. What do we need to know, Ali?
Good afternoon, Dylan. Well, the situation has finally calmed down after many, many hours of commotion here. Two of the British compounds were raided, as you know. One of them, where the 6 British personnel were taken hostage, have been released. They were given into the custody of the police, and that premises has been vacated. But the main compound in downtown Tehran had been occupied up until about an hour ago, and it took the Tehran police chief to actually physically go into the embassy and convince the Basij militia members that had overtaken the embassy and looted it to leave the place. They finally listened to the police chief and vacated the area after extensive damage was done to the embassy. Paperwork was burnt, an embassy vehicle had been set on fire, and they tore down pictures of Queen Elizabeth that were in the embassy. Dylan?
All right, Ali, thank you so much. With us here in studio today is Congressman Ted Deutch, Democrat from Florida. He happens to be on the Mideast subcommittee of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And Congressman, we had you originally booked to discuss your efforts to get money out of politics, which I look forward to getting to. But what is how are we to interpret the news of the day?
Well, I think what it shows is that this attack that was carried out by these militant students, I believe, shows the importance of dealing with Iran in a really significant way. The fact is, we know, if there was any question at all, we know after the last IAEA report that the Iranians continue to move toward nuclear weapons. This latest step by Great Britain to ratchet up the pressure is a step that we also need to move forward on. And what we've seen by this today is the pressure that they're starting to feel in Iran. We have to continue to ratchet up the pressure. As a result of what happened today, as a result of their burning the flags at effigy and breaching the walls of the embassy, I think what you're going to see instead is when the foreign ministers meet in Europe, they're going to toughen sanctions even more.
I want you to take a listen to Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer, who was talking about not just Iran, but the context of the war right now in the Middle East, and collect your thoughts. Listen, this is Tony yesterday.
There's no real war here. We're actually feeding into this, and it's a process of not allowing us then to focus on the larger regional issues, which are really what we should be looking at. We've really got to understand what our interests are. Is our interest in forming and continuing the Karzai government, which is largely corrupt, or is it to actually focus on what's necessary to achieve victory, which is looking at taking actions against terrorist groups?
And it wasn't clear which war he was referring to. He was talking about the war in Afghanistan. Your thoughts?
Well, he's right that we ought to be focusing on the largest regional issue. The largest regional issue is the threat of Iran with nuclear weapons. The president has committed to withdraw our troops from Afghanistan by 2014. We need to move as quickly as we can. It is a difficult relationship we have with the Pakistanis, but we should be using every amount of leverage that we can to make sure that they're acting in a way that benefits us.
Do you agree with some of the assessment that our war in Afghanistan and our need for coordination with Pakistan to prosecute that war is what diminishes our leverage with Pakistan? In other words, if we weren't at war in Afghanistan, we would have more leverage with Pakistan, because we wouldn't need them to support our war in Afghanistan.
Look, the fact is we do need them now to make sure that the lines are open so that we can deliver goods to our troops, so that we can keep our troops safe. That's all the more reason for us moving as quickly as we can to end the war in Afghanistan.
And then one last on the Middle East, and then we'll get to our own issues in terms of how we solve our problems in this country. You talk about dealing with Iran. That is how do you define dealing with? In other words, you understand the question.
I think we have to deal with the Iranian threat. The fact is, the president, by trying to use diplomacy, showed to the world that the Iranians aren't committed. They're not interested in negotiating. They're interested in developing their nuclear weapons program. That said, we have to ratchet up the pressure by passing tougher sanctions in Congress. We have to work with our allies to make sure that the maximum amount of pressure is exerted. What you're seeing, I think, in Iran now is the result of this pressure that's building on the regime. We need to continue to push forward, support the democracy movement in Iran. That's vitally important.
All right. I want to talk about our own democracy for a second. Efforts abroad, efforts here at home, is everybody basically is, the conversation is only getting louder, which I think everybody is grateful for. You may have heard Representative Barney Frank is leaving. I'm sure you did. But take a listen to his explanation as to why.
Look, I don't like raising money. One of the advantages to me of not running for office is I don't even have to pretend to try to be nice to people I don't like.
You have an amendment, and you agree with me and everybody on the petition and all the other petitions that exist on the principle of the corrupt nature of the auction of government, of the dependence on fundraising. You have introduced your own amendment that is certainly has the best name. I have to give it immediately out of the gate. You've got the best name, certainly in presentation with Occupied. But lay out for us the principles that you believe are central to separating business and state.
Sure. First of all, the Occupied Amendment, it's an acronym. People can go to the Occupied.
We have it right there. Outlawing corporate cash, undermining the public interest in our elections and democracy. I mean, it's a great slogan. We just got, what's the amendment?
And the amendment is very clear, and the premise is clear. If you look at the protests taking place, not just on Wall Street, but throughout the country, there is a fundamental belief that Congress isn't working for the American people. And
there's evidence of it. It's not just a belief.
There is evidence to back that up. People are frustrated, and what you see, and again, it unites, it spans the political spectrum. Whether it's the Occupy movement or all across the political spectrum, everyone would agree that for far too long, corporations have really occupied our nation's capital. They spend so much money, and since Citizens United, and given the continued push by Mitt Romney and others to define them as persons, it makes it really difficult for the people to have control over their government. Corporate dollars are flooding into the system.
Problem. What we'd like to know is how. So in other words, with the way we're driving this debate, it seems that there's are corporations people, and then there is money, and then the question is money speech, and they're kind of two different questions, and they both seem incredibly relevant. You appear to be really addressing our corporations people more than is money speech in this. Is that correct?
Well, we actually attempt to deal with all of them. Okay. There is an opportunity that we have right now to rally behind this effort, the one that you've worked so hard on,
to amend
the Constitution. Yeah. And what we do is, number one, we say the corporations aren't people. It's clear to anyone who looks at it that the framers of the Constitution never intended to give them the rights that individuals have. Number two, Congress has the ability to regulate corporations. They can't claim constitutionally protected rights to defend them against the public interest. And the big one, number three, for-profit corporations cannot spend their money in our elections. And after...
But what about this? Because, I mean, I've seen this in large corporations where I'll pay, so you're a big shot executive at Big Shot Company 123. I'm going to pay you $30 million. But I'm going to pay you $30 million under the understanding that you personally will spend that $30 million on politicians. It won't. Big Shot Corporation 123 will never be seen. In other words, why try to control the flow of money and who's what, and why not simply say, or go with what I call the NCAA rules, which is if you take money from a private source of any kind, yourself or anybody else, a union, a corporation, your mother, I don't care, you're fired. We fire U.S. kids that play quarterback at USC. If they take a hamburger from the wrong guy or gal, why don't we apply NCAA rules?
I'll tell you why. Because the problem with the system isn't the college kid who gives $20 to the Obama re-election campaign.
But isn't it all a quid pro quo?
No, certainly the kid
so
or,
you have
or
no
the
option.
seniors
If I give you $20 as a college kid compared to the college kid who doesn't give you $20, you have no more of an obligation to the kid. Then why am I giving $20?
Well, that's the problem with the system, Dylan. You've hit on it. Why are you giving $20? It used to be that people participated in the system because they believed in it, because they believed in their elected leaders. Now we've got a system where corporations can spend unlimited amounts of their own money, even in the case that you described.
But doesn't your thing give an advantage to rich people then?
No, because the last piece of the amendment says that Congress has the authority to create a campaign finance system that limits the contributions from real people, from the Koch brothers, from others, that in the example that you gave, from CEOs who may be spending their own money, but they're spending it in that's how we wrap this all together.
Very, very interesting.
And at the OccupyedAmendment.org, I think we lay out in even greater detail if people are interested.
Wonderful, and I encourage people to go to that. It's OccupyedAmendment.org.
It's the OccupyedAmendment.org.
So please check that out. It's a pleasure to know you, and I hope that we can continue this conversation.
I look forward to it. Thanks so much.
So do
Thanks
I. Coming up here on the DR Show, on the heels of that super committee super fail, Governor Chris Christie